If someone had told Zorp Glibblefizz that his 2000-cycle career as a galaxy-renowned diplomat would culminate in the most pants-wettingly terrifying first-contact scenario in recorded history, he would have laughed until all 3 of his respiratory sacs ruptured. But here he was, tentacles trembling, as he straightened his ceremonial robe for the 47th time that morning. Another thrilling day at the Galactic Council, EA Ambassador? Bleepa chirped, her 4 eyes blinking in perfect synchronization as she handed him a datapad. Only 17 trade disputes, 9 border realignments, and 4 requests for emergency funding to process. But we might actually finish before the 3rd sun sets. Wonderful, Zorp muttered, his voice dripping with more sarcasm than a Flaxian slug trail. Nothing gets my tentacles tingling like debating the proper taxation rate for imported Neptunian sea slugs. Again. The Galactic Council, that gleaming beacon of interstellar cooperation, was, in reality, the universe's most elaborate exercise in bureaucratic tedium. 217 species, all united by their shared love of paperwork, committees, and excruciatingly long lunch breaks. Peace had reigned for so long that most species had forgotten what weapons even looked like. The most dangerous thing in council space was probably the cafeteria's mystery protein Monday. Zorp slithered down the pristine hallway, nodding politely to passing representatives. A Zorganian waved 17 of its tentacles in greeting. A pair of gaseous flotions bobbed respectfully as he passed. The Ambassador Glibblefizz. The booming voice of Council Administrator Quasar echoed off the crystallized walls. The massive 4-armed bureaucrat hurried toward him, all 7 feet of his exoskeleton clattering with each step. Have you submitted Form TAR 7291B regarding your delegation's stance on the Rigelian cheese embargo? It was due precisely 3 nanocycles ago. It's in my outbox, Quasar, Zorp sighed, along with my will to live. Excellent. Punctuality is the lubricant of efficient governance. Quasar clapped 2 of his hands together, oblivious to Zorp's withering stare. As they entered the grand chamber, Zorp settled into his designated hover seat, preparing for another day of mind-numbing procedural debates. The massive chamber housed representatives from every corner of the galaxy, their forms ranging from the microscopic bitchins, who required specialized magnification fields, to the enormous crustalli, who needed reinforced seating sections. First order of business, announced Head Councillor Plex, her translucent form shimmering beneath the chamber's ambient lighting. The Andromeda contingent wishes to propose a 17-cycle study on the impact of artificial sweeteners on. The chamber's emergency alert system blared to life, cutting off Plex mid-sentence. The holographic display at the center of the room flickered, showing a security feed from the outer reaches of council space. What in the name of the 7 sacred suns? Bleepa gasped, her usual composure cracking. The feed showed a cluster of ships, crude, angular vessels that resembled nothing in the council's extensive database. They moved with an aggressive purposefulness that sent chills down Zorp's central nerve column. Unknown vessels approaching restricted council space, the automated system announced with infuriating calmness. Vessels are not responding to standard communication protocols. The vessels appear to be covered in biological matter consistent with blood. The chamber erupted into chaos. Zorp felt his 3 hearts skip several beats each. In his 2,000 cycles of diplomatic service, he'd never encountered a genuine crisis. The closest thing to excitement had been the great cafeteria shortage of cycle 8721, when they'd run out of non-allergenic food options and 6 delegates had developed mild rashes. Initiate first contact protocols. Quasar shouted, his exoskeleton now a pale shade of terrified green. And someone get Ambassador Glibblefizz to the communication station. He's our most experienced diplomat. As the security feed zoomed in on the approaching vessels, their hulls indeed streaked with what appeared to be dried blood and marked with strange, aggressive symbols. Zorp felt his career, and possibly his life, flashing before his eyes. Oh, splendid, he mumbled, as Bleepa pushed him toward the communication station. Just when I was starting to enjoy the cheese embargo discussion. The grand chamber dissolved into what could only be described as high-pitched, multi-species panic. The Flotians compressed themselves into tight, anxious balls. The Crystalli representatives clacked their pincers in distress. A group of Bitchins accidentally deactivated their magnification field and vanished from sight, their tiny screams barely audible above the commotion. Order. I demand order. Head Counselor Plex's voice boomed through the chamber's amplification system, her translucent form now pulsing an alarming shade of neon orange. Nobody paid the slightest attention. The main display split into multiple feeds, showing the unidentified vessels from various angles. There were 12 of them, each more intimidating than the last. Their hulls weren't just streaked with blood, they were practically painted with it. Strange markings adorned their sides, white skulls, bizarre geometric patterns, and symbols that looked suspiciously like weapons. By the void, their war vessels, gasped a Lumirian delegate, his bioluminescent appendages flashing in distress. None of us have seen actual warships in 7 generations. Zorp reached the communication station, his tentacles slipping on the control panel as he attempted to compose himself. Activate Universal Translation Matrix, he ordered, his voice cracking. Open all standard greeting frequencies. Broadcasting on all channels, confirmed a security officer, her 6 arms working furiously across the control panel. No response. Wait, they're boarding the defense platform. Security feed shows multiple bipedal life forms entering through. They cut through the main airlock like it was made of nutrient gel. The chamber fell silent, horror replacing panic. Cutting through an airlock? It was barbaric. It was unprecedented. It was efficient? They're heading toward the transport tubes, the security officer whispered. They'll be here in minutes. Repair emergency evacuation quasar began, but was interrupted by Bleepa. Too late. The transport system is locked down, they're already in the building. Seconds stretched into agonizing minutes as the council members stared at the chamber doors. Zorp could hear the distinct sound of heavy footsteps approaching, methodical, purposeful, terrifying. The massive titanium doors, which hadn't been closed in 700 cycles, suddenly slid shut with a ponderous groan. Lockdown protocols activated, announced the automated system cheerfully. Fat lot of good that'll do, Zorp muttered. Those things just cut through a space-grade airlock. As if on cue, the center of the titanium door began to glow orange, then white-hot. The perfect circle melted away, and the severed metal disc clattered to the polished floor with a deafening clang. Through the smoking hole stepped the most alarming creature Zorp had ever laid his optical organs on. Bipedal, with only 2 arms and 2 legs, wastefully inefficient design, Zorp thought hysterically they wore what appeared to be some sort of protective exoskeletons, though their faces remained exposed, revealing disturbingly flat features with only 2 eyes each. They carried metallic objects that even the most peaceful council member could recognize as weapons. The lead creature stepped forward, its mouth opening to reveal alarmingly white, uniform teeth. "Hello there." She, Zorp's translator informed him, said with inappropriate cheerfulness. "It's sorry about the door. Your security system wasn't accepting our access codes, or our communication attempts, or our ship's identification signals." The council chamber remained frozen in horrified silence. "Oh, right," the creature said, removing a helmet to reveal a covering of long golden filaments on its head. Formal introductions. "I'm Captain Freya Thornwood of the United Earth Alliance vessel Crimson Horizon. We've come to apply for membership in your Galactic Council. Your ships," Zorp managed to sputter, finding his voice at last, "are covered in blood." The human, for that's what the translator identified the species as, blinked her 2 eyes in apparent confusion, then burst into a sound that the translator hesitantly labeled as laughter. "Blood? Oh, you mean the paint job? That's not blood, it's just red paint. It's a human tradition, dating back to our ancient naval vessels. We thought it looked cool. She paused, surveying the terrified council. Wait, did you all think we showed up in blood-covered ships? No wonder security was being so difficult. Zorp stared at the human, his neural pathways struggling to process this new information. Just red paint? Not blood? Who in their right mind would paint their ships to resemble blood-stained murder scenes? And they thought it looked cool? His translator must be malfunctioning. More humans filed in through the smoldering hole in the door. They moved with a casual confidence that made Zorp's digestive tract clench. These creatures had just cut through security measures that had stood for 7 centuries, and they were acting like they'd simply knocked on the front door. Captain Thornwood was now joined by another human, this one with darker skin and facial fur around its mouth. This is Antonio Rivera, our chief diplomat, she explained, gesturing to her companion. He's better at the talking part. Diplomat Rivera stepped forward with a disarming smile. Esteemed council members, we apologize for the dramatic entrance. We tried hailing you on 17 different frequencies, but your automated defense systems kept targeting our communications array. We had to get creative. Zorp noticed that while Rivera spoke, the other humans were casually scanning the room, their hands never far from their weapons. Their eyes only 2 per human, how limiting. Moved with predatory efficiency, noting exits, positions of council members, potential threats. These weren't just soldiers, they were hunters. Head Counselor Plex had finally regained her composure, her translucent form now a steady, if still agitated, purple. You cut through our door. We'll pay for it, Rivera offered cheerfully. Consider it an opportunity to upgrade your security. That metal alloy was at least 2 centuries out of date. Out of date? Sputtered Administrator Quasar, his exoskeleton rattling with indignation. That door was certified to withstand a Class 7 plasma discharge. Captain Thornwood made a snorting sound. Our boarding torch is a Class 9 cutter, standard equipment for dealing with the Kraxon pirates. The chamber fell silent again, but this time with a different quality to the silence. Zorp felt a strange sensation creeping up his spinal column. The Kraxon pirates? The scourge of the outer systems? The terror that had caused 16 council worlds to petition for increased defense funding, petitions that had been tabled for further study by the Budget Committee? Did you say Kraxon pirates? Zorp asked carefully. Rivera nodded, his expression shifting to something more serious. We've been dealing with them for the past 2 Earth years. A nasty bunch. Kept attacking our colony ships, stealing our resources. The Kraxon were the most feared marauders in 3 sectors, whispered a Malorian delegate, her leaf-like appendages trembling. They've raided 17 of our outer worlds in the past cycle alone. Not anymore, Thornwood said with a predatory grin that made Zorp flinch. We tracked them back to their main base in the Sagittarius Arm. Nasty firefight, but we got the job done. You fought the Kraxon? Quasar asked, disbelief evident in his voice. And survived? Rivera shrugged, as if discussing nothing more significant than the weather. Survived? We wiped them out. All 12 of their command ships, their main base, their fuel depots. That's actually why we're here. We figured it was time to introduce ourselves properly to the neighborhood. But that's impossible, exclaimed the Lumerian delegate. The Kraxon fleet has terrorized this sector for over 30 cycles. We've lost countless ships to their raids. Not impossible, Thornwood corrected, pulling out a small device that projected a holographic image. Just required the right approach. Take a look. The hologram showed a massive space battle. The council members watched in stunned silence as the human vessels, the same blood-red ships that had just terrified them, executed maneuvers that seemed to defy physics. They darted between the larger, spined vessels of the Kraxon, weapons blazing, taking hits that should have vaporized them, and somehow continuing to fight. Is this accurate? Zorp asked, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his fear. Recorded from my command deck, Thornwood confirmed. We lost 3 ships, but the Kraxon lost everything. Their leader, Warlord Grax, tried to surrender at the end, offered U.S. tribute. Planets, slaves. Her expression darkened. We don't accept tribute. Or slaves. You killed Warlord Grax? Plex's voice was barely audible. The Kraxon commander who once held an entire moon hostage. Well, technically, his ship killed him, Rivera clarified with an apologetic smile. When it exploded. After we hit it with 5 fusion torpedoes. Zorp felt his 3 hearts struggling to maintain rhythm. These humans had just casually announced that they had accomplished what the entire Galactic Council security fleet had failed to do for 3 decades. And they were discussing it as if describing a mildly interesting sporting event. So Captain Thornwood clapped her hands together, the sound making several delegates jump, about that council membership application. Where do we sign? The Galactic Council, renowned throughout the known universe for its ponderous deliberation process, had never called an emergency session in its 12,000-cycle history. Until today. 3 hours later, Zorp found himself seated at the high diplomatic table, facing the human delegation across an expanse of polished gravitite. The council chamber had been rearranged into its formal hearing configuration, with the 217 species represented in ascending tiers around the central platform. Let us bring this emergency session to order, announced Head Counselor Plex, her voice steady despite the continued fluctuations in her translucent form's coloration. We are here to discuss the application of the species known as humans for membership in the Galactic Council, as well as to address their recent military actions within Council space. Captain Thornwood, now dressed in what she had described as formal military attire which still looked alarmingly like combat gear to Zorp, nodded respectfully. Beside her, Diplomat Rivera had produced a stack of actual physical documents, a barbaric practice that had several archivists in the upper tiers practically hyperventilating with horror. Before we begin, Rivera said, I'd like to clarify that our actions against the Kraxon pirates were taken in self-defense, and only after they attacked 3 of our unarmed colony vessels. Administrator Quasar activated the chamber's central holographic display. We have reviewed your incident reports, though we find them disturbingly sparse on procedural details. The display lit up with news footage that had been transmitted across council space over the previous cycle, grainy images of Kraxon raiders attacking defenseless outposts, leaving destruction in their wake. Then, suddenly, the footage changed. A Kraxon vessel, recognizable by its distinctive spine silhouette, was retreating at maximum speed from what appeared to be a single, much smaller vessel. Is that a human ship? Asked Counselor Morgax of the Volusian Confederacy, his 9 eyes blinking in asynchronous confusion. Scout frigate Intrepid, confirmed Thornwood with visible pride. One of our faster ships. The footage continued as the human vessel closed the distance with the much larger Kraxon ship. Then, in a maneuver that made several military advisors in the chamber gasp, the human ship deliberately rammed the Kraxon vessel's propulsion section. You rammed them? Zorp couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. On purpose? Tactical boarding action, Thornwood explained, as if this were a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Our shields are designed to withstand the impact. Theirs weren't expecting that approach. But why? Quasar's exoskeleton had gone pale again. Because they didn't expect it, Rivera said with a slight smile. Unpredictability is a cornerstone of human military doctrine. The Kraxon had superior firepower, but they fight according to predictable patterns. The footage shifted again, this time showing what appeared to be interior corridors of a Kraxon vessel. Armored figures, humans, Zorp realized with growing horror, were engaged in close-quarters combat with the much larger Kraxon warriors. Despite being physically outmatched, the humans moved with a coordinated precision that was terrifying to behold. You actually boarded their vessels? Plex's voice wavered. Physically? Standard procedure. Thornwood nodded. We needed their navigation data to find their main base. But the Kraxon were 3 times your size. Tested a bitchin' representative, his voice tiny even through the chamber's amplification system. And their natural armor can withstand most projectile weapons. True, agreed Thornwood. That's why we use these instead. She casually placed a small metal object on the table. It looked harmless enough, a simple cylinder with a pin at one end. What is that? Zorp asked, leaning forward despite himself. Fragmentation grenade. Non-nuclear, conventional explosive. Splits their armor nicely. A horrified silence fell over the chamber. You use explosives? Inside starships? Quasar's voice had risen several octaves. But the hull breaches. The vacuum exposure. Rivera cleared his throat diplomatically. Our boarding teams carry emergency hull patch kits. Very effective. Only lost 2 sections of the ship to decompression. Acceptable casualties. Zorp felt a strange mixture of horror and fascination. These humans approached combat like no species he'd ever encountered. They were brutally efficient, seemingly fearless, and possessed a disregard for personal safety that bordered on insanity. Yet they were sitting here, calmly discussing membership application procedures as if they hadn't just confessed to tactics that would give most council military strategists recurring nightmares. I believe there's been a cultural misunderstanding, Rivera said, noticing the council's collective distress. We were under the impression that the Kraxon were common enemies. Our intelligence suggested they've raided dozens of your worlds. Well, yes, admitted Plex reluctantly. But our approach has been containment and deterrence. We've established warning systems, evacuation protocols. You let them keep attacking you, Thornwood interrupted, genuine confusion in her voice. For 30 cycles? The Council does not believe in escalating violence, Quasar explained stiffly. Our security fleet maintains defensive positions around key systems. While the outer colonies get raided, Thornwood muttered, just loud enough for her translator to pick up. Zorp found himself nodding unconsciously before catching himself. What was happening to him? Was he actually agreeing with these violent, unpredictable creatures? Perhaps, Rivera suggested smoothly, this illustrates the potential value of human membership in your council. Our approaches are different, complementary even. You excel at diplomacy, cooperation, cultural exchange. We excel at solving certain types of problems. The way he said solving problems sent a shiver through Zorp's central nerve column. Yet he couldn't deny the logic. For all their disturbing qualities, these humans had accomplished in 2 of their years what the Council had failed to do in 30 cycles. And they had done it to protect their own colonies, a motivation Zorp could understand, even respect. I believe Zorp heard himself saying, to his own surprise, that diplomat Rivera makes a valid point. Different approaches have their place in a diverse galactic community. Captain Thornwood shot him what her species apparently considered a friendly smile. It displayed far too many teeth for Zorp's comfort, but he appreciated the sentiment. Tell me, Captain, Plex asked, her form now a thoughtful shade of blue, if the Council were to consider your application favorably, what exactly would Earth bring to our alliance? Protection, Thornwood said simply. No questions asked, no committees required. Anyone messes with a Council world, they answer to us. And in return? Quasar asked suspiciously. Rivera's smile was considerably less predatory than his captain's, just trade rights and cultural exchange, and maybe some help figuring out that cheese embargo situation. We're very fond of cheese. The Council's deliberation chamber, a vast spherical room lined with quantized thought amplifiers, had never hosted such a contentious debate. Representatives floated in their designated sections, argument indicators flashing above their various appendages as they waited for recognition from the speaker. They're barbarians, shrieked the Malorian delegate, her leaf-like appendages fluttering in agitation. They use explosives inside pressurized environments. They destroyed the Kraxon, countered a Drixian merchant prince, his profit-sensing glands visibly engorged. Do you know how much revenue we've lost to those pirates? 12% of gross domestic product, sector-wide. Their proposal is absurdly simple. Quasar's voice cut through the din. Protection in exchange for trade. No financial contributions, no technology transfers, no cultural assimilation requirements. It's suspicious, hissed a Vrexian diplomat, acid dripping from her mandibles and sizzling on the protected floor. What are they really after? Zorp found himself drifting toward the center of the chamber, a position he rarely took in these debates. I believe, he said, surprising himself again, that they're being truthful. Their psychology seems remarkably straightforward. Ambassador Glibblefizz, Plex's translucent form shimmered with interest. You've interacted most directly with these humans. What's your assessment? They're terrifying, Zorp admitted. Their combat tactics are reckless, their decision-making process is alarmingly rapid, and their risk tolerance is, well, frankly, it suggests a neurological disorder by our standards. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. However, he continued, they appear to operate by a consistent moral framework. They destroyed the Kraxon because the Kraxon threatened their colonies. They didn't pursue territorial expansion, resource acquisition, or domination. They simply removed the threat. And now they want to do the same for us? Plex's form rippled skeptically. I believe they do, Zorp said, but I also believe we should speak with them further before making a decision. 10 minutes later, Zorp found himself in a small conference room with Captain Thornwood. The human sat across from him, her posture relaxed yet alert like a predator at rest, he thought nervously. Your counsel certainly likes to talk, she observed, tapping a strange rhythm on the table with her fingers. It's our way, Zorp replied. We value consensus, careful deliberation. While your outer colonies get raided and your citizens die, Thornwood interrupted, but there was no malice in her voice, just a statement of fact. Why do you care? Zorp asked suddenly. Not out our worlds. Our people? You've just met us? Thornwood looked genuinely surprised by the question. Because you're people. Different biology, sure, but still thinking beings with lives and families and hopes. Why wouldn't we care? But you're so violent, Zorp said cautiously. To his surprise, Thornwood laughed, only when we need to be. Look, Ambassador, can I call you Zorp? If you wish. Zorp, then. Humans have a saying, Scivias pacem, parabellum. It means if you want peace, prepare for war. We don't like fighting. We're actually pretty good at the whole diplomacy thing too. But we recognize that sometimes you need to be ready to throw a punch to stop a bully. And the Kraxon were bullies, Zorp asked, finding the concept strangely accessible. Exactly. They preyed on the weak because nobody stopped them. So we stopped them. She leaned forward, her eyes just so strange. He fixed on Zorp with unsettling intensity. Your council worlds are full of good people who deserve to live without fear. We can help with that. All we ask in return is a place at the table and the opportunity to trade. Fair deal, I'd say? Zorp felt his biometric indicators fluctuating wildly. These humans were dangerous, unpredictable, and operated by principles alien to council thinking. Yet there was something undeniably appealing about their straightforward approach. For all their violence, they seemed to direct it with precision, against threats rather than for conquest. I think, Zorp said carefully, that I'm beginning to understand your species a little better, Captain Thornwood. And? She asked, a hint of that predatory smile returning. And I believe the Galactic Council would benefit from your unique perspective, though I suspect our insurance premiums will increase dramatically. Thornwood's laugh echoed through the small room, making Zorp's tentacles curl reflexively. But for the first time since the humans had arrived, The curl wasn't entirely from fear. The final vote tally stands at 193 in favor, 21 opposed, and 3 abstentions. Head Councillor Plex announced, her translucent form now a formal shade of ceremonial gold. The species known as humans is hereby granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities thereto pertaining. Captain Thornwood and Diplomat Rivera stood at the center of the Grand Chamber, looking remarkably calm for creatures who had just been granted access to the combined resources, technology, and diplomatic channels of 217 spacefaring civilizations. Zorp watched from his position at the high diplomatic table, still trying to process how rapidly events had unfolded. In the span of a single day, one that had begun with debates about cheese embargoes, the entire power structure of the galaxy had fundamentally changed. "We thank the Council for its trust," Rivera said, bowing slightly. "Earth looks forward to a productive relationship." "Indeed," Thornwood added, her predatory smile now somehow less alarming to Zorp. "And we promise to repaint our ship something less alarming for our next visit." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the chamber. The council representatives were already adapting, Zorp noted with interest. Perhaps these humans would fit in better than expected. As the formalities concluded and representatives began filing out, Zorp found Bleepa hovering at his side, datapad clutched in her 4-fingered hands. "Quite a day, Ambassador," she chirped, eyes blinking asynchronously for once. "I've updated your schedule for tomorrow. The Budget Committee has requested your presence at their emergency meeting regarding defense spending reallocation." "Defense spending?" Zorp echoed. "The Budget Committee is actually considering it?" "Oh yes," Bleepa confirmed. Apparently, Administrator Quasar had a private conversation with Captain Thornwood about the technological specifications of those human boarding torches. He seemed motivated to accelerate the security upgrade timeline. Zorp glanced across the chamber, where Thornwood was engaged in animated conversation with a group of military advisors. They leaned in eagerly as she pantomimed what appeared to be some sort of explosive detonation, complete with sound effects. "The galaxy is going to be a very different place with these humans in it," Zorp mused. "Indeed, Ambassador," Bleepa agreed. "Oh, and your request for transfer to a low-conflict diplomatic post has been denied." "What? I didn't submit a transfer request." "No, but Head Councillor Plex anticipated that you might," Bleepa explained cheerfully. "She's assigned you as our permanent liaison to the human delegation. Said something about your unique rapport with them." Zorp watched as Thornwood demonstrated what appeared to be a strangling technique on a willing Viltian military advisor whose 9 eyes bulged dramatically. "Wonderful," Zorp muttered, his voice dripping with more sarcasm than a Flaxian slug trail. "Just when I was starting to miss the cheese embargo discussions." Despite himself, though, he felt 3 of his hearts beating just a little faster. For the first time in his 2000-cycle diplomatic career, Zorp Glibblefizz had the distinct feeling that things were about to get very, very interesting. And possibly, just possibly, a little bit safer for the peaceful worlds of the Galactic Council. Even if their new protectors did have a disturbing fondness for explosives and the color of blood.